This is past me from the end from the end of March. Please excuse my onesie and my voice because I'm currently unwell. Caught a cold from the kids I look after. But I've been meaning to do some book haul videos for ages. And so while I'm feeling rubbish and not 100%, I thought now would be the time to sit down and do it, because if I was feeling good, I'd be out in my van doing a van video. So, I've split this into different groups and I've just filmed the fantasy one, which will go out first. Fantasy and sci-fi. I put those together, that will go out first. This is more sort of old history type books that I'm going through today. I've got 3 books, excuse me, to share with you. Yeah, 3 books to share with you. We will start with The American Boy. And this is by Andrew Taylor. He does a lot of historical based books. If you haven't read them, the Lidmouth crime series is really good. It's based just after the Second World War, and it doesn't really touch on the war. So if you're looking for war related things, that's not for you. It's set after the Second World War. But it's a really good crime series. It is a really good crime series with the same characters, so you get to know each of the characters and they're reoccurring throughout the series. Okay, this one is set in England, 1819. Thomas Shield is a master at a school just outside London. He's tutor to a young American boy and the child's sensitive best friend, Charles Frant. Helplessly drawn to the Frant's beautiful, unhappy mother, Thomas becomes entwined in the family's affairs. When a brutal murder takes place in London's seedy back streets, all clues lead to the Frant family, and Shield is entangled in a web of lies, money, sex and death that threatens to tear his new life apart. Soon it emerges that at the heart of these macabre events lies a strange American boy. What secrets does the young Edgar Allan Poe hide? Okay, so a lot of us know Edgar Allan Poe, you know, historical writer, poet, what have you. I don't know how much of this includes his actual real life, but it is a fiction based on elements of his life, I suppose. But it's not actually totally based on his life. It kind of all goes around this boy Charles Frant. So it's a very different time. It's England in 1819. Unless you have money and status, then you're treated like rubbish, to be honest. This guy doesn't have parents. His aunt raised him, and he ended up getting a job as a tutor in a private school, or in a school. And yeah, he was just seen as a tutor. He was at everyone else's beck and call. When his aunt dies, he comes into a bit of money, and there's talk about where he should put this money, into this bank or not into this bank. And as things turn out, his boss is advising him to put it into this bank where Charles Frant's family, but they basically own the bank. But a family friend who deals with all their affairs, he dealt with the will and everything else, he tells him that's probably not a good idea. There's word on the grapevine that things are not going well for that bank, and that the grandfather is very, very poorly, that Charlie's mum is basically caring for her dad currently out of the home, but he doesn't look like he's going to get better. And it's only the fact that this long-standing person within the bank, the history of the bank, has kept any faith really within sort of important families within London. That as soon as he passes, people will probably be jumping ships like rats. So that's kind of how he gets an insight into the family. And as it turns out, with various things that are going on in the family, Thomas gets sent home with Charles to his family home to tutor him privately in the home while various things are being dealt with. One of them is the suspected murder of Charlie's dad, which happens quite early on in the book. This obviously leaves his mum in a very difficult position, because once her father dies, this all happens within like weeks of each other. The father dies, her husband is murdered, potentially could be murdered, looks like he's been murdered. And she's basically left in this situation where her husband's bad dealings within the bank come to light, and everyone leaves the bank, all the people who have invested their money, and she's left as somebody who was very well off, now not being very well off, and at the hands of her older, very rich, quite unpleasant cousin, who has his sights set on her, let's say. And yes, you know, I know that's inbreeding, but back in the day, I believe that was considered appropriate, wasn't it? It was like you get a better breed of person if cousins bred, which we all know is wrong for many reasons now, and does not lead to better breeding, causes a lot of problems. But yes, so he ends up spending a lot of time with this family. He does have a thing for the mother of this boy. And he's also very drawn to the daughter of this older cousin, who's much younger, you know, obviously more his age than this older guy. So yeah, but he's treated like rubbish. I mean, in 1 minute he's brought in almost as a bit of a gentleman, and then in a split second he's knocked back down to your staff, as and when it suits. And I've been reading a lot of these historical books, and I just think it would be a horrible time to live in. It really would. The way they were spoken to, the way they were treated, they were told what they were going to do. Oh, well, you'll go and do this. You know, you can eat in the nursery with the children, and just, oh, it was such a different way of life. They had no real kind of, their life wasn't their own. They were just pawns to be moved around at the will of these rich people, and their lives could be destroyed just like that because these people had standing in the community. So who was going to listen to this tutor, you know? It's really good. It is a really good book. And the good thing about Andrew Taylor books, especially these particularly long ones, is you think you know where it's going, and then suddenly it goes a different direction. And then even at the end, you think you know it all, and then something else comes up and you go, I didn't see that. Okay, yeah, I can see that now, but I didn't see it at the time. So yeah, if you're into your historical type stuff, and you like a bit of mystery and a bit of crime, that's a good one to get into. Again, by Andrew Taylor. Now, this is called The Fire Court, and the first book that I read of his was The Ashes of London, and this kind of leads on from The Ashes of London, so I'd read The Ashes of London first, which is highly recommended. It's set when the Great Fire of London was, when was that? What is the year? I should know my history, shouldn't I? But I do not. 18 something? I've been looking through and I can't actually find the year. I'm sure I should know the year. I'm thinking 18 something. My history's rubbish. I'll put a little thing up here to, or here, to say what year the Great Fire of London was. Anyway, this is set after the Great Fire of London, when the fire court is put together. And the idea of the fire court is they obviously want to build London quickly. They don't want all this stuff, you know, they don't want this derelict part of London in the capital of the country, you know, in pieces. They don't want that. They want to get things moving quick. Let's build, let's replace things. But the problem is there was a lot of people that owned the land. There's a lot of tenants that had still got leases that they were paying for on the land. There were people who were still paying for stuff that had been burnt down, and they didn't have the money to then rebuild themselves. So there was a lot of confusion going on, and the idea was that they just wanted to get this done as quickly as possible, as fairly as possible. So the fire court was a court in London where people came and sat down in a courtroom, and a panel of judges listened to both sides of the story and decided which was the best way forward. Who was it? Keeping an interest for all parties, of course. I mean, I say all parties, but I imagine still those people that didn't have a lot of money, I can't imagine they were really considered hugely, because as I've just said in that other book, it was all about money and status. So yes, it was basically how can they rebuild the city very, very quickly. And you know, they wanted to see that the people that they were putting forward to do this could actually carry it out, could afford to do it, had the means and the ability to do that and rebuild the city. So with that in mind, this is all based around a plot of land that two parties have an interest in. And there is one of the main characters from, or not from this, from Ashes of London. His father passes away, but before his father passes away, he sees something, and his son just believes it's him. He's an elderly gentleman, and therefore he often talks muddled and confused, and it's just his muddled mind. But as it turns out, everything his father said has meaning, and it lies around the murder of a woman, and how this is linked to some of the judges of the fire court, how it's linked to two parties who have an interest in the land, and then the crimes that take place around that and the mystery that takes place around it, and how it's connected to his dad. So he becomes very interested, James Marwood this character is, so he becomes very interested and gets involved in the affairs of it all, because he wants to find out what his dad saw. And then that leads to this other person from the previous book called Cat Lovett, who is hiding herself away under the pseudonym of Jane Hawksby, because if people knew who she really was, she would be arrested for things she did to protect herself in the first book. She is basically somebody of standing who is having to pretend to be a maid so that she has a life, because if they found her, she would be arrested. And because nobody listens to a woman, nobody listens to the fact that she was attacked and raped and what have you in the first book by her own cousin. And so, you know, they would listen to him because he's a man, because he's got money, because he's got standing, and she would be forced back to him to be treated terribly. So, yeah, she's in hiding. But they're all kind of drawn back together again for this story. Now, I've not got to the end of it. I'm hoping to finish it today. Got that much left. But again, this doesn't let you down. This is much like the first one, with real twists and turns and interesting things happening. And this one is not by Andrew Taylor. This one is by Stacey Halls. It's called The Familiars, and this one's about witchcraft. And it is set in 1612, around sort of the witch trials type area, the Pendle witch trials, if you know anything about the Pendle witch trials. It's about a woman who has tried to conceive a child and keeps miscarrying, and you know, she can't bring an heir to her husband. What use is she? Again, it's set in a time when women were really there for bringing an heir, basically, to continue the family line. And she hires a midwife who turns out is linked to supposed witches. She's really a girl who knows a lot about herbs, as most witches were, knows a lot about what natural remedies can do, and so she helps with the morning sickness. She helps her to be able to carry the baby full term, but part way through this, the fact that she's kind of connected to supposed known witches means that she is arrested. And this girl who is trying to have the baby, Fleetwood Shuttleworth, you know, she's doing everything in her power to protect her baby, but she feels that it's all linked to protecting her midwife, because she feels that she will die and her baby will die if the midwife is not there at the birth. And nobody believes her. Everyone thinks that she can just have any midwife will do, but in the past no other midwife has got her to the point in pregnancy where she currently is. And yeah, she just believes that that will be the end of things. For various reasons she believes that. There's a letter involved and what have you, but yeah, she believes that she's not going to be able to give birth to her child, and that she will die, if not both of them will die in childbirth. So yes, so really good story, really good story. And especially if you're interested in things like Pendlebury witch trials and that kind of stuff, it has obviously some links to real historical events. Anyway, that's the end of that. Those are the 3 I recommend in the kind of historical, oldie worldy range of books.